Okay, good afternoon. Maybe just a quick introduction to this just really a Finlu project. And pardon if I'm in the entire time. I just had a run over here and I should actually get around to the gym. I would have said more often, but I'd all would also be good. Okay. I taught this for I think about four years, 378 and 384, in alongside Professor Verbold, and also uh, when she was on leave for larger projects, which we didn't have time to mention now. And one of the main problems was that we struggled to get students engaged in the course and in the classroom, regardless of how much you perform in front, how well you prepare, um, what books you give them to read, and these two courses are basically literature courses. Okay, so on the other hand, we also have the divide between, I'm just going to move on a bit, between the intermediate and senior phase students and also the foundation phase students. So we're talking uh, grade R to students who eventually teach grade R to grade 3 learners, and then the rest, so grade 4 and up to grade 9. So you can already see there's kind of a divide there, and they understandably had, I think, maybe still have different expectations of what an English education course should give them. In relation to that, what you should maybe just keep in mind, and I think what people don't realize, is that these English courses are obviously continuous assessment year modules. Okay, so the literature components are really just sort of a term, maybe 2 terms in some years of the overall course. Okay, so it's not like they aren't getting pedagogy, methodology of teaching, and so on. Okay, those are the important divides between the two. Then what we considered together was this idea of a literary approach, perhaps, a vocational approach. I'll refer to what they mean now. And then a foundation of, or in literary studies, which seems to be lacking to a degree, or seems to at least not be adequate or perhaps relevant enough. Maybe that's less negative way of putting it, because I don't think it's all bad what they're getting at first year, at second year level, or even at school level. And then obviously the biggest problem I think we all face in higher education, which is, reading habits. Okay, literary approach. I already quickly referred to the difference between the intermediate and senior phase, foundation phase students. The relevance of text studied in high school and first year seems to speak more to the intermediate and senior phase students. If you just have a look at the vocational approach just below. So they have less of a problem, if I can put it like that, with the kind of literature, real literature, sort of literary text we're teaching. So not just, how to teach literature, but actually learning about literature itself, reading texts critically, understanding them, and, employing kind of linguistic skills, even tacitly in understanding how text work, and, eventually by understanding how it works, being able to teach it. Because what we're doing in the classroom in intermediate and senior phase lectures, or used to do at least, was very similar to what happens in high school, I guess. Kind of a critical study of the text. Okay, whereas the foundation, I'm just going to skip over, I'll get around to point 3 under the literary approach now. The foundation phase students are constantly asked, how will this help us? We're reading, say, for instance, something like a rather big and, I think, important novel, regarded as a literary novel, something like Atonement, the McEwen texts, well-known ones, and they ask, how's this going to benefit us? And I do agree, with the question. It's a very relevant question. How will it benefit them? So what we started doing last year, something maybe I return to what Prof. Bolt used to do more often, was teach more specifically children's literature, but then the problem becomes that it's very easy in a way. It's quite simple text, and how do you engage with them critically? How do you actually enhance someone's kind of critical faculties at a third year level, which is problematic. Started giving them background information, ways of teaching literature, but getting them to read those texts, those additional articles, problematic because they required a lot of engagement, a lot of time-consuming, I think, engagement. It's not like you can just glimpse over them. You have to read the article to get it. And I mean, we're trying to teach them how to understand literature, so kind of moving into someone else's course, on pedagogy then was my understanding. So just point 3 under the first bullet there, try to teach analytical skills, try to bridge the gap with this particular course about little knowledge of literary text, literature, teach them close reading, literary devices, which often got overlooked because, we're talking about the text as a whole, but now we try to make it more specific, and Prof. We'll talk about the roles. Okay. Right. With regard to this course specifically, the foundation in literary studies was really problematic, and we tried to address it in this course by using specifically, and now we're getting around to the buzzwords, I guess, social media. But the problem we had with social media was, how we use it academically. So not just opening a Facebook page, having a Twitter account or Pinterest, which we're also using. How will we actually use it to engage them? Okay, and my concern was that they would, we can post articles and they would comment like we all comment on Facebook. It's short, it's brief, it's spacey, we're done. Quite the opposite happened, but I'll get around to that a little later. Okay, you want to carry on?
Yeah. Okay, so the possible solutions that we considered were kind of a three-pronged attack was then to think in terms of choice of text. So give them a choice, make them choose the text that they want to read. So we had two lists. The one list included texts about children. So good adult novels like, for example, Atonement, the Arundhati Roy, I've forgotten the God of Small Things, Cat's Eye by Margaret Atwood. What else did we have? Oh, Jonathan Safran Foer, Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close. So those kinds of meaty novels that they had to work through, but there was an element of interest in because they had to do with children. So they were, to a certain degree, about children and written from a child's perspective. So we thought that might grab them more. And then the second list for the foundation phase student consisted of children's literature. But because these are short texts, we made the reading load a bit heavier. So we grouped a few authors like Nikki Daly, for example, and they had to choose not only one but two texts there. There were certain texts that they had to read, certain children's literature classics like the Gruffalo, for example. And then the other choice, Roald Dahl, they could choose some of those novels. The same with the intermediate senior phase students. They also had the meaty novels, and then they had adolescent or young adult literature that they could choose from. So they had to choose two texts from the big novels and two from the other list, from the more applicable list. So the course moved then from an introduction to kind of adult novels and then moved to children's and adolescent literature. So that was the first thing. We wanted to give them a choice. And then on the other part of this solution was that we wanted to give them freedom to study and to discuss by themselves, so that it wasn't a teacher or a lecturer fronted classroom discussion of one core text where they could very easily just switch off. So they were in groups, and I'll explain that just now, and they could structure their time in however they wanted to discuss the text that they chose. So obviously within the group they had to choose the same text. So that was a bit of a logistical thing to get them, to not only be with their friends but also with other people who'd read the texts. And then the third one was the social media aspect, to bring something in where they might, feel free and feel that it's not such an academic environment to air their views, etc. So those were the three things. Okay, so the organizing principle was literature circles, and that's what the literature here is about as well, is that's kind of the foundation. I'm just going to give you a few seconds to read the definition of literature circles. Right, so apparently this was discovered, the idea of literature circles was discovered by a teacher who by accident left a few books out in a classroom and found the kids were picking them up and discussing them in groups at a level that she did not expect. And so, of course, as teachers do, they started to formalize this kind of idea into formal groups and roles and so on. So it's currently used extensively in the US. I haven't seen much literature on it here in South Africa. So the idea was that we would be using it with them so that they can use it with their learners, kind of a two birds with one stone idea. So there were particular roles. We thought that we would use groups of 5 because that's small enough so that there's no hiding place for anybody, any of the group members, but also not too small so that the burden is very heavy on the group members. The discussion director was kind of the group leader, and this person would then get the group together, decide when they're going to, or get them to decide on meeting times. And when they got to the blogging exercise, the discussion director would then also give a kind of a succinct summary of what the group decided. The device director looked at literary devices in particular. The concept director looked at deeper, more abstract concepts in the text, things like race and class, colonialism, and then when you got to the to the adolescent literature and the children's literature, to specific features of those texts in adolescent literature, things like the development of identity struggles, power struggles, drug abuse, all those kinds of things that you find in teenage literature, and in children's literature, kind of plot movements like, the character is the plot, and the movement from the home, away, home, those kinds of things were what we expected the concept director to do. The context director was supposed to place the text in a specific context. So, for example, the Jonathan Safran Foer book was set in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks in the US. So we expected some kind of awareness of that context and also of the author, something about the author. In the case of children's literature, also something about the illustrator. That was probably the weakest part of our group work, in that there was fairly simplistic kind of links between, the author's life being projected onto the novel, and not, for example, seeing that, I don't know if you know the books by Michael Morpurgo. They've also been filmed, War Horse, for example, and Private Peaceful, those kinds of novels, that they were set in the First World War, and that you had to understand something about that setting in order to understand why he writes about these topics. So that was kind of a weak spot in the group development. And then the art director was the most popular one. They were, for the adult novels, they were supposed to look at the covers of various editions of the text and decide to what extent these covers foreshadowed the events in the novel. And if they didn't like the covers, they could design their own one and describe and say why they designed it in a specific way. Now, you can just imagine foundation phase students went bananas. They loved this. So that was, and it was also very well done. I'm not being disparaging. They did very well there. Okay. So the first task that I had to do was to blog in these groups about the different texts. And that was, we regarded that as the formal academic writing development. We did want them to write and to develop their language proficiency as well. They posted the blogs on Sunlearn and we assessed the blogs by means of a rubric. I just want to refer you to our handout. If you look at the program there, you will see that it was quite intensive. It ran in the second half of the second quarter of the first semester. The grey blocks were lectures that we presented to them. So they saw us 3 times in 7 weeks. And then in between, they had to submit their blogs on Sunlearn at regular intervals, almost every 2 weeks. So there were 4 blogs. The first one was kind of a trial run. We did give them feedback, but we didn't really we didn't count the marks that we awarded. 3 and 4, we also gave them feedback, and then with number 2 and 3. Number 4 was the final one that had the heaviest weighting, because that was the one that also handed in instead of an exam or a test. So you can see it was quite a tight program. Okay. The rubric you can see below that, we are, let me just say about the program. While the blogging took place in the formal teaching time, we extended the teaching time by means of Facebook and Pinterest. So despite the fact that the formal teaching ended at the end of the first semester, they still have to respond on Facebook and post to Pinterest up to the end of the year, because now they're in the schools. So we thought it might be interesting to get some of their ideas while they're teaching. And when they come back, they've got 4 weeks. So it's a very short second semester, and we wanted to, actually push the time that we have for the module. Right. If you look at the rubric, and specifically at the third category, the literary circles, the literary circle shows insight into the novel or the narrative, and you look at the underlying bits. We wanted them to show insight that is appropriate at third year level. And in this regard, Jan Hendrik is much more knowledgeable than I am, because he knows what is expected at third year level in the arts faculty. And we wanted that level of analysis and that level of insight. But because we also had very enthusiastic students, we also wanted a category that would show students who go beyond that. And we're very proud of this rubric, because, of course, I don't know how we managed it. We got it right. It worked extremely well. We got a really good spread of marks across the classes. So, yeah, absolutely.
What this rubric does well, I think what I've strived for in the past, we all, I think, want this kind of idea, that a rubric should kind of allow you a little leeway, to balance the quality of content and the quality of execution. Let's put it like that. But also protect you and the student, against both of you, but especially the lecturer marking, so that you don't give a too high a mark to someone you like, or a topic you like, or to a book you like, or give a too, lower mark to a text you thought they could have done more with, but actually it was fine. It's just that your perspective on the text is a little different. This rubric really protected everyone in the process. I don't know how we managed it, but I think that's when people come together, and I can really advise, don't come up with your own rubric, work with a colleague, with a similar kind of vision when it comes to quality of teaching.
Yeah.
Then you have someone to also kind of assist you in this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I
use
think
it if you want.
we avoided the idea that you would give a mark for each role, so that there would be a mark for the device director and the mark for it really was an integrated rubric that it worked well for us. Okay, I'm not going to say any more. Just that being with the social media, we shifted more to the informal writing, and I'm also going to get back to the blog in our conclusion, because I'm looking at Willie, and I know he'll probably disagree that this is a true blog. They were supposed to set questions to each other and to respond to each other's blogs, but that did not work so well. I think it was also because they were so very focused on just getting it out there. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, maybe just on the blog. It's not like a Tumblr kind of blog, so we did it on I know it was mentioned before, but on Sunlearn. Yeah, for various reasons, but mostly just because it's kind of more formalized and everyone can then definitely see it. What I thought was great. Okay, social media. This helped a lot with engagement, and if you're anything like me, you like a lot of pages that interest you on Facebook. So I like various pages of authors, of about, related to writing, locally and abroad. And it's kind of the immediacy of social media, I think, that triggered us, and also the accessibility of it and to it. The fact that everyone can see it immediately, everyone uses it. I think we have one student out of about 120 or 125, about 125, who does not have Facebook. So anyway, in a case like that, we agreed, post under your friend's name, just show us if you have some kind of moral objection, which is also fine. But for the most part, it wasn't a problem. Positives. It really exceeded all our expectations. Like I said earlier on, I expected to see shorter comments. I mean, when you see these kind of Facebook wars going on, or Facebook interest groups, or, what's it, secondhand for Stellenbosch, buy and sell, blah, 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 it's short and brief. But it seems like the kind of material you post and this was prescribed reading, they had to read it. They could read it more or less on their own time, although we did try to say, read this one within the next 2 weeks, so it's never for tomorrow. Okay, so you also getting away from read this for the next lecture. Okay, so read it when you have time, but sort of within this framework. They read reviews on some of the books, some background biographical information on some of the authors, also some more thematic content with regard to how adolescent literature is structured, more witty articles, but all quite meaty, with a lot of sort of flesh, it wasn't just a random internet post. Okay, so often we made use of the Guardian's UK site and so on, because they have quite a strong cultural element, and I guess it's not peer reviewed, but at least it's quite authoritative. Right, so what we also saw was that they would comment on Sunday evenings. I mean, I'm talking past 11 at night, which sometimes gets a little annoying when you're the group administrator, because then all the notifications come through, and you're just hearing the pinging on your phone the entire time. But by the third time you're annoyed, you realize, wait, but this is actually a very good thing because they keep engaging with the material that we're giving them, which we tried in the past, but it was always a struggle to, I'm sure you all know, to get everyone to read it for that class. And you only have that lecture to deal with that material, then you kind of have to move on. So in this way, we're kind of moving past that fixed, deadline and allowing them a little more space, but also effectively giving them a lot more reading, which I think helps them understand the course better, and also the literature we're dealing with, and also how it's structured.
And a lot more writing.
A lot more writing,
Yeah.
yes. That's also the positive, yeah. So I don't know what you think the maximum length of a post would be, but I'll show you now. It's a long post is about that, right? On Facebook. That's a decent post. I mean, that's about 150 words, 200 words, depending on how far or not you're zooming in or out and the font or whatever. Okay, so that's a positive, but it's also I would also operate as a negative in a way. It's a good negative. It's a good problem to. It's a problem, but it's a good problem to have, in that it's hard to read everything. Okay, I think it's actually almost impossible to, for two lecturers, I think, to engage with 125 about students when you're posting, say, a nice decent article once a week, sometimes once every 2 weeks, and everyone comments, as I'll show you now. So for next year, that's maybe something we just have to keep in mind. How will we not assess it, but keep up with it? Like Professor van der Walt said, it's not done yet, so I don't think we're worried at this stage about getting through the reading of everything, because we still have about a term or so left to do it. That's not a problem. But it's something just to keep in mind. Maybe have a discussion class on some of the articles at some stage. I don't know. Pinterest positives. The idea with Pinterest, maybe I should just say this, was for them to kind of create their own repository of teaching material, which they had to find somewhere on the web, go to teaching sites or whatever. They were not allowed to share or to reshare someone else's work. Okay, so they had to come up or find unique, lesson plans, and there's quite a lot on the internet, but our idea was that they should create this kind of repository for when they actually go to the schools this term already, next year in the third term, and then also ultimately when they go out to teach. So they'll still have access to this group, or this board rather, so that if they're looking for a particular kind of lesson plan on children's literature or this book or whatever, if they're having a look and they're keeping up to date with what's going on, then they'll know, okay, there's a nice lesson plan, I can just go there. I don't have to go and search for it, because that's where the assessment comes in. We're not giving them marks for, I guess we are for participation. On Pinterest, we sort of, let's say you either get a 0 if you don't participate at all, kind of a 5 if you're sharing something which it's almost relevant but not quite relevant to how we described, the course outcomes, and then say a 10, if you're doing it right. Okay, so yeah, and counts a small percentage of the mark also, of the entire course mark. So it's not like we're awarding a 50% of the course's mark just for that, but it is for them to start looking for teaching material, and for us to check, is it all right? Again, I think the negative is just keeping up with it, because there is a lot. I think we have about 441 shares on Pinterest at this stage. Everyone has not shared something yet, and we asked them to share about, I think, 10 relevant things, which in retrospect we might have to reconsider now when I'm doing the math. So it's just the size of it gets out of hand, I think. It's a little out of control. But it's a very nice repository, yes? Oh, okay. Yeah, so that's for next year also. Okay. That's it's just the number of likes, or not the number of comments versus the number of who saw it, how many people saw it. And if we had a look, and it's about a two-third rate of people. So say everyone saw it, about two-thirds of the students then already commented on it, but which I think is great because it's still ongoing. Okay. So you can maybe just have a look at this. This was, how does adolescent literature work, blah, blah, blah. And this was a more creative one. So we asked them to come up with a plot. Okay. This is what they did. Okay. I'm just going to move on because, yeah. But they really put in time and effort into this. And it continues. If you think it stops, it doesn't. It's the same student there. Okay. And this is not the only student who did this. Most of them went absolutely bonkers with this. Okay. Um, Something more, academic perhaps. Who's reading it? Why are they reading it? And it seems like adults are actually reading young adult literature, which is interesting. Then, this was also what I referred to earlier on, getting them to read up on the author, but also to consider the fact that maybe the author is not really in the book. This happened once. We didn't encourage them to post to the page themselves. We wanted them to engage with our posts, the articles, just so it doesn't become a free-for-all. Because you can imagine if you have the one page has 92, 3 or something students, if everyone starts posting, it's going to be crazy. But I found this interesting that this student posted something very similar in this kind of same tone. So she got what the course was about without really thinking about it. And they commented on her post. That's the interesting thing, in more or less the same way. Just to show length, that's what they did. A friend, blah, blah, blah. This was, sorry for that one, I think. Okay, this is just Pinterest. So already spoke about this, and over to you.
Great, yeah. I think we've mentioned some of the things that we're going to do next year already. We're also going to give them a questionnaire at the end of the year, just about the course and what they thought and how they experienced it. And we also want them to submit texts that they think future students might enjoy. So, because I mean, we're not children or adolescents, we read the things that we like, and those are the things that we prescribe. So we thought, let's get some text from them. What are the things that they think students should be reading? But then just some of the problems. We weren't always sure that all of the students read the books, but I mean, I think that's always going to be a problem. If I look at the kind of superficial interpretation, then I thought maybe they just read notes on the internet, but it could also be that they haven't really engaged with the text at all. The dominance of plot is a problem that I see even with PGCE students. If you ask them to talk about the literary devices, then they get trapped in plot. They tell you the story. Or if you ask them about context, they tell you the story. So that kind of, I think that we require more contact with them in that, more guidance maybe. Then, as I said, is this real blogging, what we call blogging? We would like to, make that process more interactive so that they do respond to each other's posts, and so that it's more of a conversation among them and not simply an assignment that they post for us. Possibilities, we want to, at the end of this year already, give this year's second years the books for next year so that they can start early. We want to give them more guidance, more interaction online, and we also want to introduce Facebook earlier. We thought that according to our program, it was supposed to be there right from the beginning, but then we thought, no, wait, it's too much of a writing burden. But in the end, they seem to deal with it fine. So we're going to have the pages up right from the beginning. Right. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Interesting indeed. I think having an arm at school, sure. We didn't have any of these related teaching ideas, so thank you very much, and also the good work that you did. Questions?
Well, I think in this case they are just forced to read. The ones who don't, and I mean they are fairly upfront, but they say they don't like reading. But I think Jan Hendrik.
Yeah, what we also did was well, let me start like this. We didn't want to police them, because when you lecture, 4 or 5 times a week, you end up policing them and asking who read the book, who didn't read the book, because you kind of have to know, so you know where to pitch. Okay, so with the literary circles, we asked them to fill out a kind of an evaluation form for each group member. So everyone in the group had to rate the others for every post, for the more academic assignments, for the blogging part. So by doing that, we hoped, and we'll still look at those forms and compile some feedback on that. We hope that would work to kind of get them to read and work together. So
shame them into reading.
Yeah, because if you're 5 people, and some of them did come to us and said, well, this person is not doing his work or her work at all. Can we maybe just go on and do it alone? We tried not to allow that, but when someone's literally not on campus ever, kind of have to also rethink it. But then if there's a really serious issue, they come and tell you. Otherwise, they sort it out amongst themselves. The other thing, which might be quite controversial, is the idea is that they at least read something. I think that with this model, they read more than they would have percentage-wise anyway than they read in previous year. I think all of them, most of them, have a better sense of what all the texts are about than in previous years. I don't necessarily agree with everyone's methods. I mean, maybe some of them did use Spark Notes or e-notes or whatever other notes on the internet, but I mean that's not a new problem. It's not something that this model is presenting. I actually think it's something that this model kind of works against in a way, because they're 5 that's working together, and they can't hide. Okay, so they worst case scenario, you can split the book into 5. We wouldn't know that, but at least they would engage with the text.
But
I'm just wondering, do you have an example of what the box actually looked like?
oh, I actually do. I was going to show you. This unfortunately is one that I actually that I marked. But you can see here, this is the director, and these were the questions that they asked. And then that's the device director. So you can see it's substantial writing, concept. The bits in red are my comments, and then context, and then that was the art director. And she also did, she devised her own topic. So they were also supposed to reference, so it really is an academic essay that they're supposed to develop. But yeah, what?
So just how did that present that, and where would you comment on Sunday? I'm curious as to the choice in Sunday.
This was unfortunately the last one, and I was on my way overseas, so I downloaded them and marked them on the plane.
I think it would be nice if everyone could see the feedback, but I think the problem might be that it could also become quite personal if you're commenting in red and pointing out spelling errors and everything
Yeah.
online on Sunday and where everyone can see it. So I think it was a good method because everyone could see everyone's blogs or the posts they made to see that they, or at least to try not to repeat exactly what someone else said, which was also part of the idea.
Yeah.
The idea was that they had to add to the text and sort of create a little circle of knowledge around it. But being able to download it like this from Sunlearn was something I think that Tumblr wouldn't have, or something like that wouldn't have allowed us. And we had the Word documents, so we asked them to post it and also to add to attach the document for us, and then we return this via email, so it kind of stays a little, I don't know, a little private maybe.
Yeah.
For some here and there, someone made a little boo-boo, and it didn't go that well, but it wasn't necessarily because of poor work. It's just because they didn't quite get it. Okay.
I'm just matching to that. Within Sunlearn, the system sort of has a forum post, is that how it is?
Yes, yeah. The if I can give advice, don't try the blogging thing on Sunday. It doesn't work well. The actual blog, of course, the forum thing is really a blog anyway. I don't know why they actually have another blogging function as well, but that's now moving into the IT component of the course, I guess. I tried, the blogging thing, but formal blogging, trademark Sun blogging or whatever, and it didn't. It showed on my side, sometimes it showed on their side, sometimes it didn't show on their side. So the forums worked exactly the same because you could comment on it and post to it and so on. I didn't actually know why they don't just call that blogging itself. But yes, it's forums.
And my actual question.
Yeah, go for it.
With Facebook, did you use your personal account? Did you use...
No, I use my personal account, but my privacy settings are of such a nature that no one can see anything on my page anyway. So yes, also prefer doing that so they could see that I am engaging with them personally. So it's not just university account or something.
Have a separate Twitter account for students.
It was easier for me to control also than having another account for two things, which would have been harder and I wouldn't have been able to keep track of them as easily. Yes.
Thank you, it's very interesting. I have a quick question, actually just administrative privileges. When it came to Pinterest, how did you track you created boards and you submitted ones? Did they put a link on Sunday to your board, or did you just go and have it work?
No, the Pinterest was separate from Sunlearn. So we could see by their names which what they posted. The idea was that it would be something that they can use even when they're not students anymore. So that's why I didn't go through. Well, I mean, you can't. I don't know if you can do it on Sunlearn, but I mean, the idea was that it would be something that they can still access.
What we also did to kind of manage the course overall was to make use of the email function on Sunlearn. When you make or announcements or whatever, you just select the email option, which you all know better than I do probably. And then we posted the links to the Facebook page and to the specific Pinterest board
Yeah, that's what I'm assuming.
relevant. So yeah, I just posted the just checking because it went either way. Just so they know exactly where to find it. But we also told them in class what the board's name is and so on. So it's a little admin because you have to keep up. They get angry quite easily if you don't give them posting privileges, because it's on my personal account, which I don't mind. I created a board for separate boards for both groups, and they had to like the board or follow the board or something, and then I had to individually, type in their names and give them collaboration rights.
Yeah.
That's the word.
Yeah.
Status.
Sure.
I said, of course, it's been gone leaps and bounds since I taught them years ago. It was 5 years ago. And at the time, I was still struggling with the students to do PowerPoint, and they struggled to do that, and I used to show them in class. But I think that the interaction that's taking place with the new methodology is really interesting to me for students. I know at least 70-80% of them, even when I talk to them, they did not like me. And having people with that kind of attitude leave the university, not convinced that reading and writing and blogging and any kind of interaction is really a slight on the university if they leave without that. So I find this really, really interesting and very encouraging that the students are interacting at this level and working together in groups because they're not always convinced that it works.
Exactly.
But I remember at the time for them to do Wiki Daily, I'd ask them to work in groups and to write the story of one of the people in, like a childhood story from one of the people and develop that into a sort of story so they could read each other's work and read other stories. Yeah, it was always just such a mission to get them to interact and get them to interact with this level.
To be perfectly honest, I've been so discouraged by this specific teaching that I really didn't want. I was willing to pay somebody from my personal money to teach that module because I couldn't stand it anymore. They, all the texts that I feel so passionate about and that I love, I present there and they just rubbish it. So I didn't want to teach this anymore. And this was kind of a last ditch effort to just get them more engaged. And I must say now I'm all enthusiastic again. So it's
I don't
really...
think that it had anything to do with the teaching, but it was just sort of, a facility that seemed to come along with those students. And I remember I also found it extremely frustrating. Now, of course, some of them are Facebook. They've searched me up in their Facebook friends.
Really?
Yeah, we learned it's crazy to bring the political issue into it as well, especially with the Nikki Daily story. They'll read up on the politics and read up what Nikki Daily is saying behind all of these texts.
Yeah.
Trying to get them wasted. And they hate almost everything.
I know.
That you give them, they hate it. But they do take the lessons along with them.
You mentioned, you explained to us the different roles of the lists. You mentioned one of the roles, I can't recall the name, where the input is not as
Context director.
Yeah.
So how do you manage to motivate the ones who have to do those roles?
That's one of the things that we need to monitor and guide more closely. The concept and the context, because concepts very quickly became themes rather than concepts. And the context was we really need to guide them more closely as to what we want there. These are not the only roles. If you go into the literature, and you'll see in these articles that I chose that there are a variety of roles, and it depends on the level, at which they are. For grade 4s, they've got all kinds of, cute names for the different roles. And then going up, they would use these more formal kind of roles.
And do you assign those roles or do they choose?
No, they choose. They choose. We made them choose the groups as well, which I wasn't, actually we didn't know how it was going to work because by the time we saw them the first time, they already had the lists of books. We gave them to them in the first quarter of the first semester so that they could start reading. So by the time we saw them the first time, we didn't, you know, they had to find people who read the same books, and not necessarily their friends. And I still don't know how they did it. I'm just glad that they managed to get themselves into it.
Professor Naval referred to literature that you spoke about. Please say things to are there any other questions for our and if you read the page live, then just go
Yes, I think that's the idea. So they can go back to it, and maybe it's a place for us to keep sharing things for them when they actually start teaching. I mean, ultimately, I think the idea would be, now maybe I'm speaking out of place, but that this kind of model with the literary circles approach, is used in other, years as well. I think that would be that would be wonderful, and that way, keep the Facebook page live. It's going to stay there. But what I might advise them to do is we have another Facebook page, for English education students. So I might tell them, I'm going to keep what we did. I'm not going to close it, but please like the other one as well, because there I'm getting to all the students I've taught over the last 2 years, for instance. So maybe that answers your question. Yeah,
Yes,
that would be a great
exactly.
idea.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I quickly say something about these articles are not necessarily kind of academic journal articles, but they do say something about the concept. The first one, the one that says Wiley on the cover, what was interesting there was the idea that choice is a very big thing in literature circles, so that they choose the books that they like. And that I think might have been one of the reasons why this worked well. The other one is more about how to get students or learners collaborating and get them interested. So these are both focused on school education and not necessarily teacher education. But I think the principles are basically the same. Willie, have you got any advice for us with the blogs?
I'd like to look at it, how it actually looks, what it looks like on the forums. I understand how the forums will look, so I can see how that looks. But there is a little bit of a balance that we have to keep between privacy and exposure. And when we move to blogging outside of the learning management system, outside of something, it gets easier and more difficult. So it all depends on how sensitive the writers are, process on the content. If they are ready to show it to the world, then I would use something, well, not Tumblr, I despise that.
No.
But something like Blogger from Google or WordPress. Blogger from Google works very well on the university network. We also have access to Google Classrooms. I just don't know how to get it apparently. So there are those options, and that gives you an external audience of other teachers worldwide.
That's true, yeah.
So that adds another dynamic to it, but there is always the privacy and security.
There's also, I've heard of university policy that says you're not allowed to create content within the university and just expose it, or just show it to everyone. There is something like that. So that was one of my concerns. But yeah, just adding.
Yeah.
I like WordPress.
I think we have time for one more question. Gavin, did you also
I didn't say you.
I'd like to know if you're willing to share the feedback that you get. If you have specific feedback questions, that you add to the normal feedback forms that you give us. This is something that's new, that it's a new method of lecturing to the students, and something that hopefully they'll take with them. So those kinds of questions, and then if you could share that feedback on how the students receive this
Okay, at the end of the year. Okay.
Okay.
I just thought of using something like SurveyMonkey or even SunLearn. I don't know if there is a questionnaire format.
Because I'd like to see what the students thought about the blogging as well as the content of the course, the blogging and Facebook and Pinterest, to sort of get that kind of feedback so we know what to use in the future, what to encourage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we would also love that.
Professor van der Walt and Melinda, just to thank you again very much for your input here today. This one is actually meant as a token of appreciation for the two of you. But I said that I already used that for so please, that is yours to take along with you. Something from the city Alpha Center, just to say thank you.
Thank you very much.
You know that they are going to use it.
Yes, no, they're working very, very well. Thanks.
Thank you. Thing from our side is the feedback form. We just got feedback before you. And then if you have any further interest in the topic or you'd like to make contact with either one of the presenters, please feel free to drop me an email or even to drop